All right, everyone, welcome back to the show. We are doing a very special deep dive today into Union College. We've got Matt Malatesta, who is sticking around for the entirety of the show. He's the vice president of enrollment and admissions at Union, so we're very excited to have him along for the ride. Now we're going to move into a conversation about the engineering program. Matt talked a little bit about the specialness of Union and engineering being connected to liberal arts. We've got the dean of the engineering school, Ashok Ramasubramanian, is joining us here to talk a little bit about that program. Ashok, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
I'm excited to have you here. And in my last segment, I was sort of playing as though I were a student that was starting to ask questions to learn a little bit more about Union. And here's a question that I get often from students that I work with who are interested in engineering. Does Union have a good engineering program? And they ask this question as though the answer is yes or no, that it's binary. But I wonder, as an engineer who works with students, who is the dean of the school, how do you engage with questions like that? Is engineering good at Union?
Sure. One of the difficulties with a word like good, is that it's an adjective, right?
Right.
And adjectives mean different things to different people. Especially as engineers, like we are trained to move away from adjectives and move into specifics. So, yes, I will answer your question bluntly first. Union is an outstanding engineering program, but outstanding, just like good, is an adjective. So what makes us outstanding is if you look at our graduating population, it's nearly 100% either going into jobs or graduate schools. We have a strong tradition of undergraduate research. So students work closely with faculty on design projects and research projects. You got to bear in mind, Ian, that Union has exactly 0 graduate students and 0 graduate programs, right?
Yeah.
And even some of our small school competition, like they have master's students, and which means there are graduate students, and graduate students are usually active in research, and they sometimes get first dibs on faculty time. Like 0 is a very easy number to remember, right?
It is.
Have 0 graduate students. We have 0 graduate programs. Undergraduate engineering education going back to 1845, mind you, 1845, 16 years before the start of the Civil War. That's our bread and butter. Faculty like myself join Union because we want to work closely with undergraduate students. So there's a lot of opportunities for undergraduate students to work one-on-one with faculty on research, on design. On top of it all, we have outstanding facilities, right? Things like an atomic force microscope, usually not found in a small school. Well, we have 2 of them. And, things like a 5-axis water jet machine, usually not found in many schools, big or small. We have one of those, but we train undergraduate students to use those. So because of these factors, I'm confident in saying, like, we're an outstanding program for undergraduate students.
Ashok, it was a yes or no question. No, that's wonderful. I think that's great. And I love that in the time that you just had, which was like 3 minutes, 2 minutes, you gave us a lot that we can pick up on. And I think I would encourage students to follow these threads, right? Think a little bit about facilities, think about the availability of faculty members, think about the history of the school. You mentioned 1845. Something you talked about, Matt, in our first segment was also the tradition of Union. I think sometimes there's a concern that schools that have had a long tradition, that they might be stuck in old methods, right? Stuck in the past in some way, that there's a traditionalist approach to their studies, but engineering is something that needs to be more cutting edge. How does Union balance the sort of tradition of the school and the history of the school with the cutting edge needs of being a modern engineering educational institution. And Matt, I'd love to hear also what you think around other disciplines at Union that come along with that. But Ashok, I'd like to hear your answer first.
That's a good question and a fair point, Ian. Like, it's good to be proud of your tradition. And, I mentioned a specific date, like 1845. Like, we certainly don't want to be tied to the methods and techniques and machinery that was used in 1845, right?
No.
That would not only be wrong, but it would be like tragic. Among other things, like safety protocols were let's just say pretty lax before the modern era. So while we are proud of our tradition, and for anybody that is interested, I strongly encourage them to walk around our campus and take a look at buildings like the Knot, which is a very historic building. So while we are very proud of our tradition, we are also extremely, forward-facing, keeping up with the times. We have a new initiative called the Templeton Institute, and we, within the bounds of the Templeton Institute, we look at cutting-edge technologies like artificial intelligence, data analytics, so that our faculty and students and staff, for that matter, we are all continuously reinventing ourselves and adapting to our to the new technologies as they come along. But the tradition also helps us to have perspective, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes just that there is a new technology, right? There's a tendency to like, come on. Let's all quickly jump on the AI bandwagon. I'm taking artificial intelligence as an example. And, one of the advantages of having a rich tradition such as ours, it helps us take a step back like, whoa, wait. Yes, artificial intelligence is a very, very powerful technology, but let's look at it from all aspects, not just what the technology promises. For instance, like many people don't know this, but these huge computer server farms that are needed to run those heavy computing uses a lot of water and is not
Right.
really good for the environment.
Right.
So having a rich tradition such as ours, Union College has been through the invention of telephone, television, radar, sonar,
The wheel. Yeah.
Like AI is not the first big technology that we have come across. So we won't ignore it, right? That would be a foolish thing to do, but it also helps us have perspective on really analyzing the new and upcoming trends from many different points of view. So we do respect the tradition, but we are also continuously learning and assessing new technologies as they come along. So in a sense, like best of both worlds, right?
Right. My mother is a professor at Arizona State. I'm here at her house, and we were having a conversation last night. I think she thought it was an argument. I don't think it was an argument. We were talking about modern approaches to teaching, project-based learning, and also thinking about the historical successes of different approaches to teaching. And so I'm going to actually zag from my initial question that I wanted to ask to you, Matt, and ask you something a little bit different that dovetails with what Ashok was saying about AI. Has there been conversation outside of engineering within liberal arts and liberal arts disciplines, especially at Union, about AI coming, what that means for the educational experience for students? How are faculty talking about this? How's the admission office thinking about these things happening so quickly?
Yeah, I mean, I always try not to be whatever. I work in admissions, but I try not to be too much like we're better than X place or Y place. But I can't imagine a better place, a place more equipped to take on those kind of things. As Ashok mentioned, it's not just about the science or the technology aspect to it. There is humanity involved in all this. And
Yeah.
I'll give you the best example. Like, as before we were talking about, it's in the water at Union. Ashok co-chairs the Templeton Institute with Professor Andy Burkett, who's an English professor. And so as we are taking on topics like AI, it is being led by someone from engineering and someone in the humanities. And that's like very part and parcel to the approach at Union for a lot of different things.
I heard a little bit of even philosophy in your initial answer about what is a good engineering program, which I love. It depends on our definition of good, which is great. I want to pick up a little bit more about this intersection between liberal arts and engineering. Ashok, can you speak to what it's like to be a faculty member at an institution where engineering is so integrated with liberal arts and where students are getting instruction across these disciplines as opposed to being siloed in their specific majors?
So, as you mentioned, Ian, the integration with liberal education is a core aspect of the union engineering experience. So the numbers vary somewhat, but very broadly speaking, engineering students take 40 classes before they graduate. And fully 10 of these classes are outside of the technical fields. So they are history, philosophy, dance, literature, and so on. So we feel that the engineering graduate of today and in the future really needs to have a broad-based education, right? I'll give you the classic example. Often, when I was a young person, I went to a tech school and I got a pretty technical education, did not really take any liberal arts classes. And I think for that day and age, that was fine. But in this day and age, for engineers to be able to solve differential equations and write code, that is still necessary, but they also need to consider the social, economic, political, cultural, environmental aspects, and so on. The engineer of today really should not be what I call the engineer in a box, right? Yeah. There's a supervisor or somebody higher up says, okay, design team, engineering team, go ahead and design a bridge, design this product. Here are the specifications. This is what the math you'll need to do. Go for it, right? And then the engineer just does the design and say, okay, well, what about the environmental considerations? What about the people that will be displaced? What about the harm to climate change? That's not really my problem. I've been given specifications and I met those specifications, right? So we want the engineer of today to really ask the hard questions like, should this project move forward? Let us consider the environmental aspects. Let us consider the people it will affect. Let us consider the effect like 3 generations from now, But I want to say a word of caution, right? This is not about left-wing versus right-wing politics. We are not training engineers to always say, wait a minute, there is an environmental impact. I am not going to do this project. That's not the way forward, right? What we are advocating against is this engineer in a box syndrome, like not asking questions. So in a union education model, that's a big problem. So ask the questions, have conversations with people you disagree with. Actually, have conversations, especially with people you disagree with. Move forward, learn to make compromises, and see the whole picture, and not just, hey, here is the design. Let's do the design.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, sure.
Another point I will add in the middle of all this is that none of this should be construed as union engineering is some kind of engineering light, where the economic aspects are emphasized, but the technical aspects, like we drop a math class. No, none of that.
It's a both and situation.
It's very, very, very strong.
Yeah.
And the other aspects is in addition to technical rigor, never replacing technical rigor.
I also think like, and so I know we're coming up against the break, but it's also not just about US thinking on this. Like, I think one of the statistics that's most profound about the engineers at Union is the high percentage of engineers who study abroad. And I think that's a hard thing for engineers at a lot of schools to do.
It is. Yeah.
And at Union, over 60% of our engineers study abroad.
That's
So
remarkable.
it's a real piece of
Wow.
life. And I always, that's like, I kick the tires on these kind of different options. It's, you know, it's just a real differentiator, because as Ashok said, it's about, you know, learning. It's not just, it's got to be the technical, but it's also got to be beyond the technical.
It's special. My mom would love your answer, Ashok. I think she gave almost the exact same example last night about engineers thinking about environmental impacts in community conversation. So thank you for that. Maybe. The last thing I just want to briefly, we've got 30 seconds or so. Ashok, you alluded to outcomes for students 100% being employed or going on to graduate school, coming out of the engineering program. Just briefly, where do your students go? What do they do after they leave Union?
Well, a good chunk of them end up in industry. Our footprint is especially strong in the Northeast. I'm talking about companies like General Electric, which is whose research headquarters is like, 2 miles from Union's campus.
Oh, cool.
Nearby town of Niskayuna, New York. And GE's big turbine manufacturing campus is like literally down the street. So a lot of folks going to GE, Knowles Atomic Power, Boston, NYC area. Increasingly, we are seeing a good chunk of them going on to graduate schools. From my own lab, right? Just my lab, in the last 5 years, students have gone on to Columbia University, McGill University in Canada, Worcester Polytechnic Institute. I mean, that's just my lab. And we do place students in some of the top graduate schools as well. And, a small contingent of students do go on to things like law school, business school, and military service.
That's great. This all sounds wonderful. In our last segment, we're going to understand a little better how to pay for it. We're going to talk to the director of financial aid at Union College and learn a little bit more about different kinds of scholarships, need and merit-based aid. But Ashok, thanks so much for coming in. I've got so many more questions for you, but we don't have time. So we'll have to have you back.
Okay, thank you.
All right, folks, don't go away. We'll be right back with our final segment today.